Yes.
Gonna go ahead and record.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much. And I loved the first episode. Oh my gosh. I
Yay.
basically, when I got contacted about covering the series, I was like, "Well, okay, I've never heard of these books. Sorry."
That's fine.
And I am a book person, so I'm like, well, if I want to see something, I want to know a little bit about the story. So I bought the first book and I just finished reading it and
Mm,
I loved it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I
mm,
need to read the rest of them.
thank
So,
you.
seeing how that was brought to the screen was just just so delightful because
Yeah.
Andrew, you've created a wonderful story and it's so worthy to be put onto the screen this way. So,
Thank you.
congratulations and thank you and thank you.
Yeah, my goodness, what a great encouragement that is. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mhm.
I was just thinking, I was talking to Chris. It's like I have nephews who are 7 and 6, and it's like, oh, well, I'm gonna send them information on this too, so that they can see it. So I was just kind of wondering, can you maybe fill me in a little bit on the backstory of how like the two of you came together and how this wonderful story is now coming through Angel Studios and going to be available for everybody to watch.
You want me to go, Chris? I can
Yeah,
I
you
can
do it,
kick us
man.
off. So yeah, it all started with Slugs and Bugs and Lullabies, which is a CD that I put out with my friend Randall Goodgame, who now has built a whole company called Slugs and Bugs, which does like scripture songs for kids and that kind of thing. And but the first record was this kind of fun little album that he and I put out together, just as a side project, and that made its way to somehow to Chris. At which point he was working at VeggieTales, which was this empire at the time, and they needed a silly song, so they asked my friend Randall and I to if we had anything. So we wrote the silly song, and that was the beginning of our friendship. At which point I gave you a copy of book one when it came out, and you and your family kind of went on the journey for the next, I think, 10 years, I guess, that it took to write all of the books. And meanwhile, I once I finished writing the books, I kind of thought, okay, well, I guess that's the end of that story. I wonder what I'm going to do next. But Chris and I just had these conversations about what if we were to try to bring this thing to the screen, and you you decided to jump off the cliff and go for it. I'm just amazed. Chris just kind of took the mantle and was like, let's do this. And it took years and years and years and years of work, to get us to where we are now. So that's my version of the story.
Yeah,
Did I
it's
leave
great. Yeah,
anything out,
Sister
Chris?
Zaya, the interesting thing there is I think that a lot of us will connect with certain stories and just go, I want to be a part of amplifying or helping tell that story. And like you, I'd read a bit of that first book and was like, oh, this is charming, this is fun. And then the second book was far more than the first in its like epic stakes. And I was like, oh, this is really going someplace. And by the end, I had read aloud to my older three kids and just cried repeatedly at just these beautiful moments. Andrew had written inside the first book when he handed it to me, for Chris, and then he wrote in there, "The stories are true," and I was like, "It's a fantasy story. How can they be true?" And what he intoned by that we immediately got to was that the situations the families and these characters find themselves in and the way that they have to fight through together as a family were true. They were true to our experience as a family. They were true to my own personal experience as the oldest kid. I really identified with Janner, the lead character. And so the story just kind of gripped me in a way that I was like, how could I be a part of this in helping to tell it? And I think that's a really wonderful place when, as a storyteller, you can really connect to the story you want to be a part of. And that's not always the case. Some of us, help others tell their stories, and it's somewhat passive. In this, it became a really passionate thing for not only myself but also our whole family. As we stepped along this journey, Andrew and I officially partnered together to make a little company to develop the series and try to get it forward in 2016. So it's been a long journey of developing it and finding the right place for it, and finding families that don't know about it, introducing them, and this amazing fan base has rallied around folks that slowly found the books, read the books, and went, "How do I not know about these? These are fantastic." and it's just been a delightful experience.
That's wonderful. I'm an oldest as well. So I could definitely see Janner, a little bit of me and Janner, trying to want to break away from his siblings and go off on his own. I had this feeling like it was like Lord of the Rings meets the Chronicles of Narnia, and that kind of fantasy feel to it. So I guess a question that I have is what obviously family is really important in the stories. And so what are the values that you want kids to come away with as they're watching this series? Because I write for a Catholic audience, a faith-based audience, big VeggieTales fan years ago. And so I need to let my audience know, like, these are the values you're going to find as you go through this. And even wondering, are you going to have like suggested ways for parents to talk to kids about certain things? And so I guess, like, what are those things that you hope that kids will find in the series and in the story?
Man, that's a great question. It's tricky because we're trying to I have opinions about this, and I've got to think about how I say it. Like, it's tricky because if you try to, like, as the author of the story, right? If I'm trying to think to myself as I'm writing, I'm going to put certain values in this story, then you're getting the cart before the horse, and the kids can sniff that out, and they'll kind of feel like, is this a Sunday school lesson? And I kind of like really believe strongly that, like, first and foremost, my job was just to tell the very best story I could tell. And I am a Christian, and so I was like trusting the Holy Spirit to do whatever he wanted with that, right? And so that, having said that, like, when I look back at the stories, I can see a lot of the things that were going on in my heart and in my head and in our lives playing out. So right out of the gate, there was this Janner Igby is this kid who's living in a small town, and he kind of thinks his life is kind of a little bit pointless. He doesn't really, he looks around and is like, is this all there is? And everything he reads about in books is this grand adventure. And then he finds out that he is precious, and that he is a part of a great big story, that he couldn't have fathomed that he was a part of a story as big as it was. And so that was a little reflection of some of the things that I was learning. One of the big things is naming, as you'll read as the series goes on, this idea of, like, where your name comes from and what your name implies about you, and who you are at your core, not because you have given yourself a name, but because it has been bestowed on you by someone who loves you. So there are things like that that are going to show up. But one of the things that I noticed as a dad, when I was writing the books, my kids were little, and I was trying the story out on them. Like, I would read the chapters to them once I had a chunk written, and I noticed when I was reading these stories, my first hope was that they would just not fall asleep. Right. I'm like, I just want them to get swept up in a big adventure, and to laugh at the right moments, and to get scared at the right moments. So that was the thing that was at the front of my mind. And at the same time, though, I really wanted to give them an example of a story where the parents actually listened to the kids, where the kids, a lot of stories we were reading at the time, there was this tendency for the kids to feel like the parents were in opposition to them, or they just didn't understand them. There was like almost an antagonistic relationship, and I was like, that's just not been true of my experience as a dad. And so I wanted to write a story where the family actually really liked each other. They loved each other, but they also really like hanging out, and they're when they're under pressure, things work better when they're together, right? And that wasn't like something I was trying to shoehorn into the story. It was just true of my experience. So those are a few of the things that come to mind.
Wonderful. I noticed that you got some amazing voice talent for this series. You know, I mean, Kevin McNally, I mean, like the ultimate pirate, right? To play the grandpa, and Henry Ian Cusick. I know he's known for Lost and everything, but I really loved him as Jesus in the Gospel of John. And so, you know, what is it like working with all these wonderful, wonderful talent that you have there?
Yeah, I'll chime in on this one. You know, I think there's a sequence that has to occur, Hosea, which is first a story of a certain quality, a certain craft has to exist. That talent attracts talent, and if you're telling a story that's just not that great, you won't attract people to that project, and that applies across the board. And I've had the privilege of working on some projects that attracted some talent, right? And people said, I want to be a part of that because it's a good thing. And in this case, Andrew had set the table with this wonderful book series. And so as we invited folks like Jody Benson and Henry Ian and Kevin McNally and all these others, they saw the material, saw then what was visually developed by some of our brilliant artists, and said, oh, I want to be a part of that. And I had this great, one of our record sessions with Kevin. He had done the first session and then had been away and came back. And he's like, yeah, my son was asking about this project. And I told him, yeah, I'm on some cartoon. But wait, he's telling his son, it's not just a cartoon. These guys, it's really good. And it was really gratifying, you know, that he felt that. We're putting it in there. We really expect audiences to find a robust tale. We're not here to do a cartoon. We're here to really pull them into, and we'll do it through winsome and clever ways, right? But I feel very passionate about this space. As you were speaking a minute ago, children more and more have the power to choose what they consume in entertainment and stories. And sometimes those stories will twist their little hearts and minds in ways that are untrue. And I want us to be in a position where this story can go out effortlessly to the widest audience possible, to be able to engage with and be a part of a story that is rooted in truth. And I think you have to do it, like Andrew said, in a passive, if not subversive way. That if it's overt and curriculum, children understand they're being engaged to be taught something, and it's propaganda, right? I'm here to tell you instruction. But they also know the difference when a story is being told, and they're pulled into it and their little hearts open up. And all of us, I think all of us are wired for stories, and a good story is necessary. So craft is really important to us. I think part of setting up this series, we knew as we had different opportunities, was the need to find the place where we could really establish the craft of what we wanted to do in animation, and both visually and the storytelling and the acting performance. And so those actors then finally breathing it to life are part of a long journey of craft. You don't just get to invite an actor like that and read something stupid. They have to get in. You got to give them something good. And it's been very rewarding to have those people not only pay attention to the project, but sign on and love being a part of it. It's been great.
Yeah.
They have all been so great to work with.
Wow, that's wonderful. One question, will there be, I've perused the website a little bit, but are there going to be, like, I don't know, activities or like questions for family discussion done so that like parents could follow up on that? Or is that kind of, you know, let's just let the story speak for itself? Is there anything like that kind of in the works?
I think you just said it. We're probably going to lean more toward let the story speak for itself. That said, Laura Hiddle has been this wonderful advocate for the books over the years. She kind of like helped moderate the website for years, and she's a librarian and a scholar, and she actually understands the world of Air better than I do. And so we have often asked her questions like, "Hey, wait, can you help us remind me about this?" And so she's like this keeper of the lore. But she has developed reading guides for all of the books that I'm pretty sure you can find pretty easily on the website. And I think that if somebody were to ask for that, I would be like, oh man, read the books with your kids. And there's these reading guides that would help walk you through that. But it's not a bad idea. Chris, you may have thoughts on it.
No, I do. And my thoughts are, I think sometimes the discussion in unpacking can be a little reduction of the mystery. And I don't want that. We all experience Star Wars. There's the Force in the Star Wars. Oh, the Force. Yeah. Okay. I'm into it. And then George Lucas chose to tell us about midichlorians in their blood. And I was like, that's too much. Like you got to like, oh, you ruined the story. Like leave it
It's
mysterious.
science now. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, if you start to explain things, it's like if I sit down after Chronicles of Narnia and start to explain the characters. If I go into Lord of the Rings and say, oh, so I think Gandalf's the Holy Spirit, like, it's like, no, he's Gandalf. Like, let it be, and let the meaning of it kind of be mysterious and do its work. And I think that's a real place we want to own. So yes, we want to help engage in discussion about the story in a way that's healthy, but try to avoid getting too much into the weeds of kind of identifying themes or traits or ideas that would spoil the story.
Sure, sure. I think the characters are so strong that, you're going to have kids who are going to, dress up as Jenner for the next Halloween, or
Mhm.
and somebody who I work in media literacy. It's like, how do you help people make media choices that are true to their own values? And I think giving them characters like these three kids, like grandpa and like mom, and giving them people with excitement and doubt and fear to identify with, so that they can also know that it's okay to be afraid. I think it's such a strong thing. And I'm sure that they're not going to need any discussion questions to start as soon as they finish watching the episode. Oh wow, did you know that he could like talk to the dragon and all of that kind of thing?
Well, and I think, like you just said too,
Yeah.
like one of the things that really struck us reading the books, and I'm sure you're getting us too, is that this is a family and some kids that not only love each other, like families love each other, but they actually like each other. Andrew talks about this a lot, that they like being around each other. And sure, they irritate each other and have their problems. But one of the things that's been interesting in casting is because so many cartoons and stories like this will put the characters into this kind of grating, like, oh, you're dumb, oh, I don't, and just kind of there's a certain something that shows up in the relationships. And we have fought very hard to keep those relationships true. That Janner loves his little brother Tink. He also irritates the fool out of him, but he loves him. And they actually like hanging out. So even as Tank starts to make choices that are irritating to Janner, there's a love there that keeps them in relationship and not just digging at each other, which we see so often. It's just everywhere, right? And then of course, man, I got to get rid of mom and dad, and my grandpa doesn't know anything. And no, that's not how it is in most families. It's like mom and dad are cool, and I love my grandfather. Like, so that's it. But I tell you, it's interesting because in the booth as we're recording, like it just kind of wants to go that way, because so much of our stories are that way, that we have to stop and go, oh no, don't read it like that. That's not how we want it to be played. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. One last question. And this is for both of you. Just kind of in general, could you just talk maybe a little about what are your hopes for the series, and like, if the best thing happened, this is what it would be.
Oh man, I know my wife's answer to that question has long been the best thing that she can imagine would be action figures in Target. She's always
awesome.
talking about that.
Yeah.
And so that's my thing too, is like, it's not about like the breadth of success. Like, well, yes, of course we would love for it to have a wide reach and for a lot of people to know this thing. I think about what certain kinds of stories did in my heart as a kid, about what it was like to reread the Narnia books as a dad to his kids, and to experience what was happening inside of me and inside of them in that process. And so that's my highest hope for this show. Like, I remember I love movies and grew up, I'm a child of the 80s. So Spielberg and like there's a certain kind of flutter in the stomach that I remember really well when I would read a certain kind of book or watch a certain kind of movie that I believe actually is a kind of a signpost to what is actually true, right? C.S. Lewis talked a lot about that there's this like catch in the breath that we experience sometimes, which is an arrow pointing in a direction. And that's actually what led him to Christianity. And so that's my thing, is like stories, sometimes we can't control it, but sometimes stories can do that for people. And my hope is that the story would be one that like when a kid watches the last episode or finishes the last book, that they lie in bed awake and they feel that flutter in their stomach, and that little signpost points them somewhere.
I would say for my part, I think that I hope that families will choose to engage the story. I think a lot of times with certain media, we see a lot of sectoring, right? Where kids go watch a certain something and adults watch something else, and and they don't get to participate and share in the story. I hope that we are able to signal and to tell people about this series in a way that families go, "Oh, I want to be a part of that." I remember as a dad watching The Incredibles and going, "Hey, hey, there's a family doing cool stuff. That's like us." And I long for those moments where we can rally around stories of bravery and sacrifice and redemption that our whole family can engage in, and that are robust enough for adults and teens to pay attention to. I think when you get kind of a little too simple, little guys are into it, but the adults are out. And then sometimes you get a little too violent or too, and the little guys are out. Something that we can gather around that's going to be a little scary for little guys. It's definitely going to have some fighting and action and adventure, peril, but is, enough for the whole family to gather around. So I think that's the hope I have. And I think, like we said a second ago, I think, we do want to kind of segment our media. What is this? And we've really had to struggle against people saying, oh, it's a faith-based series. It's really not. It's a fantasy series.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there are two faith-based individuals leading the charge on it. But that's passive. That we hope that our worldview will come through. Everything has a worldview, but the story itself I hope can be accepted by a wide audience as a fantasy series. I think that's a real hope, and we're working really hard to try to tell that part of the story, so that we don't exclude. I think there's a way in which we could people might turn it off and miss the story, which would be sad.
Yeah. Well, thank you to both of you for taking the time to come on this morning and chat with me. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how the series goes along after it comes out in December. And I want you to know that part of what we do as my community, the Daughters of St. Paul, is that we pray for people in the entertainment industry. So know that you are not only in my prayers, but in the prayers of my whole community, and also all of the people that you're working with, your animators, your sound people, your voice talent and all of that. You are all in our prayers.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, God bless you. Have a wonderful day, and thanks again, and congratulations.
Thank you. Bye, sister.
All right. Take care.
Bye.